This is Pastor Dave, and these are Vacation Bible Stories with Pastor Dave. This is the story of Gideon found in Judges chapter 6. In time, the Israelites fell back into their wicked ways, and so when the terrible Midianites came to take their land, God did not help them. For 7 long years, the Israelites were forced to hide in the mountains while the Midianites took their crops and animals. And in desperation, the people cried out to God, who sent a messenger to Gideon to tell him that he'd been chosen to strike down the Midianites. Gideon was shocked and could hardly believe it. God told him to tear down the altar of Baal in the village and to build a new one to God. And Gideon did the deed with few servants in the dark of the night when the villagers found out. They wanted to kill Gideon, but his father told him if Baal truly is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks his altar. So they left Gideon alone. Gideon was still not convinced that he was the right man for the job. He asked God for a special sign. I will leave this fleece on the ground, be from a lamb skin, right? I will leave this fleece from a lamb on the ground in the morning, and if it is wet and the ground is dry, then I will know that you're going to use me to save Israel. And in the morning, the fleece was soaking wet, but the ground was dry. But still Gideon begged for one last sign. He says, tomorrow let the fleece be dry and the ground wet. And so it was, and so Gideon was convinced. Gideon and the men who had rallied to him looked down on the tents of the Midianites. They stretched out as far as the eye could see, covering the ground like a swarm of killer ants. But even so, God said to Gideon, you have too many men, and I do not want the Israelites to think that they have won because of their own strength. Tell anyone who is afraid to go home. And after Gideon had spoken to his army, only 10,000 remained. God said, you still have too many men. Tell them to go and drink from the water, and take only those who cup the water in their hands to drink, not those who lap it up. And when he was done, only 300 men were left. That night Gideon looked down on a sea of tents. Could he ever win? God knew that he was anxious and told him to creep down to the enemy camp. And when he overheard the soldiers recounting bad dreams about losing, he returned full of confidence and roused his men, giving them trumpets and empty jars with torches inside. The men reached the edge of the camp. Following Gideon's signal, they all blew their trumpets, they smashed their jars, and they shouted out loud. And the harsh noise and the sudden light startled the Midianites so much that they fell into confusion, and the soldiers fled in terror, even turning on one another in their fright. And in this way, God defeated the Midianites with just 300 men.